Welcome to the What's Up Verdict podcast. We fashion ourselves cinematic judge and jury. My name is JJ Crowder. I'm here with my co-hosts Mattson and
Better read than dead.
and Alec Burgess.
Let's get it.
We appreciate you tuning in. Go ahead, hit that follow, subscribe, like, bell notification buttons. Help us grow the podcast. Tell a friend about us. Tell a family member about us. Tell a hacker about us.
Please don't tell hackers about us.
That's fair. I mean, do but don't. Wait, I don't know how that would work, but anyway, hackers don't tell any really strange people in business suits and sunglasses. Definitely don't do that. Yeah, we're wrapping up the month of original screenplays, and we're doing it with a bang. And we're going to talk this week about The Matrix. It was released March 31st, 1999 on my 18th birthday, fellas. Shut up. It was written and directed by the Wachowskis. I'm going to leave it at that. And it stars Keanu Reeves, Lawrence Fishburne, Carrie-Anne Moss, Hugo Weaving, Gloria Foster, Joe Pantoliano, Marcus Chong, Julian Arahunga, there we go, and Belinda McClory. It was about when a beautiful stranger leads computer hacker Neo to a forbidding underworld, he discovers the shocking truth. The life he knows is the elaborate deception of an evil cyber intelligence. That's a terrible synopsis, but sure, whatever.
Yeah, that was not their best version.
Yeah. Whoever wrote that one, kind of silly. But this was my movie, my one and only pick this month. I love this movie. I saw this movie on my 18th birthday. It was interesting because my buddy Kyle at the time, he's talked to us a couple times on here, Red. He talked me into going to see it because he got an early screening or something. I don't remember, but he convinced me to go see it because I was like, I don't know, dude. Keanu Reeves, he was in this interesting mode where he'd done some major movies, but he'd also done some really weird ones. And so I was like, I don't know. This just kind of seemed like a weird movie to me. So, but he convinced me and I sat down and watched it and went at the time I was like, that might be the greatest movie I've ever seen. Just because it was so different and it introduced so much new technology that you just had never seen anything like that before. And then, yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about it, but it intrigued me because it was so different. And then the idea, it kept me on it was weird. And I guess I'll start this. It's not really a twist to me, right? The whole, you're fed starts off keeping me going because it gives you this weird intro where you're like, oh, how was she able to do that kind of shit? And then it goes to this, what feels like as normal as you can be with Neo waking up, right? And then his computer targeted. So it's just this constant barrage of where's this going? And then when it gets there, you're like, oh, that's a cool idea. And then the real twist, if you will, if there is a twist, is that first moment where Joey Pants is sitting in the restaurant eating the steak. But even that wasn't necessarily much of a twist, but it was just such a good story that you're just I need to know more about this. And then the world building that they did. And so this one really stuck with me. I think I saw it in the theater 3 or 4 times. But yeah, it was amazing. What did you guys think of it?
Hold up, red or blue pill?
Oh shit. See, this is a question. I think in the moment I would definitely take, the red pill or the blue pill, whatever the fuck one it was. I don't even remember. I would have wanted to not be in the Matrix anymore at the beginning.
Alec?
Oh, I'm taking the blue pill. Fuck that. I am staying in the Matrix. I got a job as a software writer and a little side hustle on the side. I'm not going anywhere.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to think I'd take the. I think it's the red pill that gets you out, and like do that and be the hero. I probably would have taken the blue. I don't know, man. It's just life's a lot better, and sure, I'm in a simulation, but it's a pretty good one.
I think too, like, yeah, we're getting in. I was going to ask this question later, but we're getting into it. I think from Neo's perspective, I take the red pill and I stick with it because he's fucked. Like, they know that this group that he's after, specifically Morpheus, is after him and want him. So the agents aren't going to leave you alone at that point. And then obviously in this movie, we didn't know where we were headed with some of this and the fact that he basically had to take the red pill for the whole thing to function. But in this movie, I mean, I think he's screwed. So he has to take it and get out because otherwise they're not going to let him stay in there with them chasing him like that. On the flip side, though, if I'm any of the other people that they've pulled out at this point, like I'm not the one. Fuck that. I'm Joey Pants in this movie, dude. Fuck you. I'm Cypher. I'm going you guys are not. I'm going back. But like watching him eat that steak, like I love that scene.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's just like, I know this steak isn't real, but ignorance is bliss. And then like, yeah, I love that.
I think the criminals that know that they're the tweeners, they know that it's not real, but they take advantage of it. Like that seems like an Alec move, especially, and I could see myself doing that as well. Where you're like, hey, you know it, but you're in command of it, and you can benefit more from it. Pretty good life.
Well, I'm not bungling the operation where you fucking turn in Morpheus.
Yeah.
Like, dude, that's one thing you got to get right.
Yeah. Well, and why? Like, I always laugh at Cypher because he's like, he throws down the weapon. I'm like, you don't put your weapon down.
Double tap.
Yeah. You fry them all till they look like Dozer. Like, yeah. Sorry. It's just, you make sure they're not getting back up. And then it's a whole different animal. But yeah.
But that's one thing I love that they did in this movie is the contrast between the Matrix and like the real world and the clothes and the colors and the environment. Like you just felt a little depressed anytime you saw them outside the Matrix. And I mean, clearly that was by design because it's the whole point of it and the juxtaposition. And then in the Matrix, didn't they have like a slight green hue?
Yep. Every time you're in the Matrix, everything's kind of got a green,
and it was more pronounced
tint.
in the second and third one because I remember it even more so than maybe even the first one. But again, all of it by design. And that's one thing I love about this movie is they make you feel it. And they make you feel it immediately. And you have that tug of war of like, oh, am I more like a Cypher? Am I going to be like a Neo? And you're like, oh. But then the more you watch, you're like, well, I can understand why someone would want to sabotage this because why do they want to go back to this drab ship in pipes and they're trying to like fight off these machines that look like squids? And it just all seems rather depressing when you could be back in and eating a steak that you know is fake, but hey, your fake taste buds make it taste fake good. Like, sweet. Send me back.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's to their credit, like getting Joe Pantaleone to do Cypher was just genius because he has that likability, but he also like has that just villainous, like you believe that he's doing this because he's sick and tired of being out. It's not that he doesn't like these people and he wants to like hurt them, but yeah, I get it. Like that shit sucks, dude. I wouldn't want to be stuck in that.
He's the type of actor that when he came out of his mother's womb, like I feel like he just had a sinister face and then like a happy one and like went sinister again. He just yo-yoed.
What's weird is seeing the man with hair. Like that's the one that anytime he's got hair in like some old movies, I'm like, Joey Pants with hair? That's weird. I would have sworn he came out just bald and never grew it. Like, because I can't imagine. Like again, the original Bad Boys movie when he had hair, I'm like, that just doesn't look right. Like,
yeah.
I love Joey Pants.
For me, with this movie, I remember when it came out, Alec, I was in my friend's basement and I was 8. and it had come out in theaters, and I didn't see it immediately, but we had all talked about it. I was like, oh, I'm kind of young. I don't remember when I first. I think it was a little bit later around then, or it might have been a few years later. I'm fuzzy on when I actually saw it. It definitely was on TV that I watched it the first time, because I didn't have an ability to go see it in theaters at my young age, or anyone that would take me. So I don't exactly remember when I saw. I just remember the first thing, we were playing Ninja Turtles, a video game, in my friend's basement, and we were talking about the movie The Matrix. Like, it was all over the place. Had trickled down to an 8-year-old,
Yeah.
and that's how you know how big it was. But then at some point, I watched it, and I mean, like you kind of talked about, just a transcendent movie. It was amazing. Like, just so good. Like, everything. I mean, I could go on and on. Even having just watched it again for, I don't know how many times I've watched this movie. Not nearly to the extent either of you probably have, because I don't rewatch movies as much. But I love this movie. Like, I don't even. There's probably little nitpicky things to say, but just such an imaginative, different, thought-provoking movie, and it's just cool. That's what I remember. It's just like, just smooth and cool.
Mm-hmm. Alec, when did you see this for the first time?
Yeah, I don't know. I do know I was 5, almost 6 when this movie came out, so I didn't see it then.
Fucking babies.
Yeah, I was busy watching, I don't know, Teletubbies.
I was getting ready to graduate high school.
I think I actually saw this movie the first time with Javier.
Mm.
I want to say. And something that I always forget when watching this is how much of a setup the first one is.
Yeah.
Like, it just as it starts feeling like it's going to ramp up, it's over.
Yeah.
And so I like that, though. I like the world building that goes into it. It's something that we don't get a lot of, just to begin with. Certainly not anymore. Right now, you'd have 3 Matrix movies that are all the same, copy, paste. Instead of having one film that stretches over 3 time periods that do the world building, character building, and story all combined into one. And so that's what keeps me going back to it. Is the novelty, I guess is the best way to put it, of the fact that where they should start their third act is where they end the movie.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know how you were able to stand it, JJ, waiting a couple years until the second one came out, or not even knowing if there would be a second one. Because by the time I got around to watching this, I mean, they were almost filming 4.
Yeah. It's fair. It's fair. Here's the weird thing about this movie for me. Like, I would have been perfectly okay, and let me be clear, I would still be perfectly okay if they never made the sequels.
If it was a one and done, I knew you were going to say it.
I think, and there's a couple reasons why that are weird and goofy, but I think the major reason why is because I think this movie, the way it ends, allows you to go, this is interesting, and and I think there would have been room for maybe some books, comics, whatever, which they did, but I didn't need 2 and 3 for me to. And look, I watched them and I enjoyed them to a certain degree, but I think this movie was so well contained and done. And to your point, it was different. Even the structure of the movie was, like you said, you get a 10-minute sequence at the end that's the third act, and you're like, whoa, wait, what? But I like the way that it ends, minus the flying away thing. That part always, I was like, what? That's weird. You had to turn him into Superman? Like, I don't like that. But that was my only beef with this entire movie. The first time I watched it was like, just have him hang up the phone and walk away. Like, that would have been enough for me. But that's so nitpicky. But I would have been perfectly fine if they'd never made additional movies of this. In fact, I think one of its biggest problems is down the road when it gets to 2 and 3, because this one was such a massive success. It boosted up the budget, which let them do a bunch of CGI, which at the time didn't look real great in a lot of cases, especially in the fight scenes when they're digitizing Keanu Reeves. I'm like, let's switch back and forth between.
Oh, the pole scene, which is cool with the agents, but also detracts, but is also super cool. I have a war in my head about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I forgive the awful visuals because it's such a cool moment that all of that is
They
happening.
were pushing the boundaries, but it was
Yeah.
a bit much.
But to me, like that was it's the biggest detriment to an independent, not huge budget film like this when it then makes a ton of money over top of its budget. So I think this thing made like almost $200 million on a budget of less than under 100 million for sure. I think it might have been even under 50 million. Like it was I don't remember what it was, but it was lower. So it made a fuck ton of money. And of course, Warner Brothers at the time was like, well, let's make more. And the Wachowskis did, and they were very successful. It was a very interesting story, overarching when you get into the second and third. But I would have been perfectly happy if they never made them. I thought this movie was wonderfully self-contained.
Well, it's easier to say that now because, well, I mean, don't get me wrong. I watched 2 and 3, and I enjoy them. Certainly not so much 4, but they're weird at the same time. There's some. We're not going to go into that today so much, but they try to get really philosophical and do some of the things that it's not that it doesn't work, but it kind of doesn't work, kind of does work, and it's just a lot. They're trying to cram it a lot when at least this movie was much more simplistic about how you knew the one and his crew were going to try and take down the Matrix, but then they throw in these other variables, and yeah, it goes places that even now, like when I've watched them, I've gone to like Threads or ChatGPT and explain like all the intricacies of how this could work, and weird. And if you think about just this movie, the way it ends, you're like, there's so much possibilities you could think of how it could be done and everything. The reason 2 and 3 is still get by is because the fighting just gets better. I mean, those things
Sure,
just
yeah.
get way better. Because this movie, for all intents and purposes, I think some of the, if I was the nitpick, I was like, I just want to see a little bit more. Like, give me ramp up a little bit, as Alec was saying. But I'm okay with it because I know what they're building and how they're getting there. Because there's parts of this movie that are a little slow, but having seen this so much, I know what's coming, and I love the rise of Neo, and I'm okay with it every single time. But do you just say this movie's boring, Tay? Tay thinks the Matrix is boring. That's hurtful.
Someone's living in the Matrix.
I know. But I also forgot how much Neo speaks in this, or Neo, and why am I forgetting his name?
Morpheus.
Keanu Reeves speaks in this movie. He actually does a pretty good job. But this movie and this franchise without Hugo Weaving is nothing to me. Like, he is incredible.
Oh yeah,
Mr. Anderson, and like his dialogue and his monologue, some of those things, like honestly, he's my favorite character. I love his persona and what he's about, and the more you learn about his motivations, and that part, I do think they do well in the later movies. But I love his character, and to me, this movie is nothing without him. Because every actor is great in this, but Hugo Weaving, he's a scene stealer for me.
for sure. Hugo Weaving. Well, and without this movie, we don't have him as Elrond, I don't think. So that helped that too. But yeah, he absolutely, like his speech to Morpheus while he's trying to break him, like it's the smell. Like I just like that whole monologue to me might be. I mean, it's definitely top 2 or 3 moments in the whole movie. Like I just love that you're a disease, like, and just the way he delivers it, and that just flat, almost monotone, and yet very pissed off, and like you can feel the angst pouring off of this program, right? Like you're just like, this is wild. So yeah, he absolutely makes this movie. And then I think to me though, like the way that they build the characters in general in such a short amount of time, this isn't a long movie, and so like you get on the Nebuchadnezzar and you only get these characters, like the other parts of the team, for a few moments, but like I love APOC and Switch and Mouse, and like I can't help but go, I want to know more about Dozer, and you know what I mean? Like tell me about Tank and how these things work, and like why do we have that? So it's like, and I like them. I'm actually pissed when they start to die. I'm like, no, that's fucked. That what a fucked up way to go too. Like this is bullshit. So that too, the storytelling, the introduction and use of the characters, and it's really smart and well done, because we get emotionally attached, at least I do, you get to a certain level of emotional attachment to these characters, and you only know them for a few minutes. And it's not like they do anything significant. I mean, Mouse's biggest claim to fame is the lady in red, right? Like the woman in the red dress. But that little moment where he's like, and you get, I think it's APOC or is like, oh, the digital pimp hard at work. Like it's just like, it's so relatable, even in, they're far in the future in this terrible circumstance, but you can't help but relate to them. So it's just genius writing for how that went for this movie too. Like just clutch. But I like all the characters. It's wild. But I think Morpheus too, Lawrence Fishburne, he's another one that
Oh yeah, 100%.
Without him, it's funny because Neo's the main character, but Neo could have been anybody. Yeah, I think anybody could have played Neo. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm glad it was Keanu Reeves. He played it well. But anybody could have played him and it would have worked. Morpheus and Smith, on the other hand, not so much.
Well, didn't this movie put Lawrence Fishburne on the map too, or is he already on the map before this?
He was already a B.
Kind of. Well, I mean, it took him to A.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it pushed him way over the edge, but he's around. Lawrence Fishburne. He never broke any movies like this one.
The only reason that you wanted to be Keanu Reeves after the fact is because his dedication to physical acting. He was able to take this movie to new heights in that regard, where someone else like they could have cast that could have been a better dialogue actor may not have put in as much time and effort as he did. Because that's the part of this movie that, I mean, the fight scenes, just when he's in slow-mo, when he figures out he's the one and doing all this thing, say what you want about Keanu Reeves, but dude exudes confidence with physical acting like almost no one I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, and I like him too because where he struggles with actual dialogue a lot of times, because like he has a hard time delivering it sometimes. It's just how his voice is. But at the same time, like non-dialogue scenes, the guy is a genius at across the board, not just in this one, but it comes through in this one. Because while he talks a lot more than he usually does in a lot of movies, like he doesn't talk a ton. Like he has very little. Everyone has very minimal dialogue in this movie, except for Hugo Weaving. For the most, he probably talks the most, besides maybe Lawrence Fishburne. But it works, like in the moments where all he says, like, and even his stupid, like when Morpheus jumps the first time across the building, he's like, "Whoa!" Like that. Even like normally, I'm like, "Fuck," there's Keanu Reeves, but it worked in that moment. I was like, okay, I think all of us would be like, whoa. So, which I also love that moment too. That's another one that gets you all excited for the character building, is they're all standing around watching Neo. Like, I love that part where Mouse comes running. He's like, Morpheus is fighting Neo. And they all fucking, it's like the Super Bowl, dude. They all come running out and they're watching it. And yeah, like that's just, they're standing there and they're chewing on their fingernails and shit when he's getting ready to jump. Nobody makes the first time. But what if he does? He won't. And then he falls. That shit's funny. I love like that. Just scenes like that just make me smile. I was glad watching this movie again.
The other things that stand out to me in this movie are the music. They kind of blend two different things, like that kind of like that rock thing, we know the Matrix theme song, but then also like the heavy beating of, like, I don't know what they are. It's not cymbals or chimes or something, but that like start when the fighting is happening, and like the brass that plays. Always, I mean, you could play those little runs and I'd be like, oh, I know what movie that's from. That's definitely a Matrix sound. And I think they use both of those to their advantage to, one, make this movie, like I said, or they're smooth and cool, because this movie's got swag to it, like absolute swag. When they're going into the bank and trying to free Morpheus, they just look cool, and they bring in like the BDSM community to an extent, like and popularize that type of culture and make it cool. And I'm sure it had an effect after the fact from this movie. The music, the sound, and then obviously just the fighting. Like, I mean, you think about when you're a kid, like later on, everybody was doing the Matrix, like the whole, can you stand there and do the limbo and put your arms back? Like, it definitely had a lot of pop culture implications. Even to this day, like, and those are to me always markings of a movie that transcended what it originally even thought it could be, and that's definitely this movie.
Agreed. I'm curious, like, we know you'd stay in the Matrix because
Mhm.
you're, yep, I get that. Like,
Do you like this movie, Alec? I feel like you're just kind of like, it's fine.
I'm not a big fan of documentaries, but this is one of the better ones that's out there.
This
No,
guy.
I enjoy it. I mean, I don't have like I'm pretty sure the first time I saw it, I was like 16 or 17. So like I don't have the nostalgic, emotional tie-ins to it. I was like, oh, that's a cool movie. And then as I watched more of it, I was like, oh, this is a really great documentary. I got swindled into watching a documentary. But yeah, so I mean, I like it, but like Oshi loves this movie, but she also saw it when it first came out, type of a thing. And so she has that emotional attachment to it that I just don't have. And so I'm like, yeah, it's great, but I don't have that, real kind of tie into other movies or tie in that I get with other films. So I'm like, yeah, it's good. I love it. It's great, but I don't I never tried to bendwards, backwards, limbo, and dodge the dodgeballs that came flying through. I made fun of that kid, but like I never tried it.
This is always a movie movies for me that when I do rewatch them, I think I go somewhat long in between, so I can like try to forget like little things that I know I would remember. This is that movie, like, frick, man, The Matrix. If it's on TV, which is like never happens much anymore, unless I'm trying to find something in between, like commercials on a football game, which still does happen. If this movie's on, it probably takes me away from the football game.
Yeah,
and that's power because I love football.
Yeah, it's an interesting point of view, Alec. I never really thought about like when this came out for me. This revolutionized movies in a lot of ways. Like the whole bullet time thing, like fuck the amount of movies that use bullet time, quote unquote bullet time after this movie came out was outrageous.
A lot.
Because it was different. Like I vividly remember sitting in the theater with my buddy Kyle, and when Trinity at the beginning, like that very first, and the way they set it up, I don't know if you've ever seen the behind the scenes stuff. Like when she jumps up in the air and they've got her on the ropes and she's got her legs all coiled, and then it freezes and circles her. Like they had this big U of cameras that it would run along, and then it was really interesting tech. Nobody had ever done anything like that before. So when it happened in the movie, like I remember, like you guys ever see that Joe Rogan clip where he's ringside of like the fights, and he does this shit. He's like, I fucking did that shit. I smacked Kyle. I'm like, what the fuck just happened? Like, and then she's running on the walls and shit. Like, this is one of the first ones that revolutionized like string work too. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this movie made a lot of huge differences in action sequences that we'd never seen before, and they still use this shit today, right? So it's, for me, like this movie's a game changer because when it came out, there'd been nothing like this, even remotely like this. I mean, outside of like, Dune touched on certain things. The 80s version of Dune had tried to match some technology, things like that. But like nobody was as successful at it as The Matrix because the timing all fell in place for him. So it was just really cool. So it's interesting to hear that point of view. I never really considered. I was always like, fuck, man, everybody's got to think The Matrix is just like this wild ass revolutionary movie, right? Like evolutionary movie. But like, yeah, if you see it 20 years after it comes out the first time or 15 years, you're like, oh, it's actually kind of janky compared to what they do in some places now. But like, and I don't know. I think the other thing that impresses me about this one version, like the first Matrix movie, is it holds up. Like, I don't have any complaints, especially this one, about the visuals in the movie. Get into the second and third one, there's complaints. But this one, I don't have any because it wasn't like they digitized a human being in it, right? Like it was just, they just slowed everything down and did this interesting camera trick to make everything look interesting. So I loved it. And it has one of the greatest action sequences ever in the bank.
The bank scene is wild.
That's crazy. And I will say, when that moment when they drop the bomb in the elevator and that door goes fucking flying through the whole thing, So cool, right in front of the big fireball that comes out of it. I do often wonder, is like, wouldn't that whole building have just collapsed? But sure, whatever. It's not, I'm not gonna argue about it. It looked great, but I love that scene, like when they're freaking doing flips and shit and grabbing guns. And Casey was laughing. She watched it, and it's probably been years, decades maybe, since she watched the movie. And we're watching it, and they're shooting, and she's like, I feel like they're wasting ammo. Like, I was like, they probably are. She goes, I feel like he threw that gun down way too early. But whatever. There's probably still bullets in there.
We need bullet counter Javier.
Yeah, no shit. No shit. But I was like, too, when he opens that jacket, I was like, man, had to have been hard to walk with all that hardware in there. That's
Guns.
heavy.
Lots of guns.
Yeah. Yeah, that whole thing. And
but that's like that's like the swagger part of it. Like they hit that so well.
Yeah. Well, and like as a video gamer, like that part, the whole virtual reality kind of shit, like the other piece that as a kid was like, fuck, was like, okay, you plug a fucking needle in the back of your head, which was really long, by the way. Like every time I watch this, I'm like, how they first show that, I'm like, that would come out of your mouth. Like,
it's going to your eyeball. I'm like, it's right there to your temporal lobe, like right before.
Yeah. And I mean, in theory, you would think it would have to at least connect to your brain, right? To be able to inject the information. But that was something I was like, fuck, I want to plug in and learn Kung Fu. Like, that's one of the great lines, too. Is it comes out, I know Kung Fu. Like, it's fucking great. I want to learn how to fly a freaking helicopter in 2 seconds. That shit's awesome. I love that part of that movie. He's like, yeah, he's been going at it. It's like 12 hours straight or some shit. Like he's a machine. It's just such a simplistic storytelling movie, but there's so much complexity in it too. And so I just really love the story and how they play it out. And so many just memorable moments. Like, and then there's some Keanu Reeves moments too. Like the ones that when he's crawling out the window, he's like, I'm gonna die. Like I was like, oh God, that's such a terrible delivery of that line with his face, the way it I'm gonna die. I'm like, oh, that's a Keanu Reeves moment. Then what was the other one that really like when he's at the door with the girl and she turns her shoulder and the white rabbit's the tattoos there, and he's like, yeah, I'll go. I'm like, oh God, there he is. But for the most part, like I can't even complain about that. And I love Keanu Reeves. I just have to say that sometimes his delivery of lines is like, what?
It's easily glossed over. And honestly, I don't even think I think about it.
Yeah. It's very easily forgiven in this movie because the rest of it is so just goddamn good that But Hugo Weaving, best part.
He's, incredible. And I never thought someone could smile and look so sinister, but not like scary, but like confidently terrifying or something. I don't know. And the other thing that this movie did, I'll never forget. I remember Lawrence Fishburne's his sunglasses, the rimless sunglasses. Like that was another iconic thing that is like, just never. I'd never seen anything like that before. And I was like, it's such like a Matrix thing. Like I never thought you could even do that.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not anything like groundbreaking. You didn't really think about it, but just another little thing that just added to like the aura of the movie.
Yeah, that was dope. I loved it. I love, and the fight scenes are cool too. Like I think one of my favorites is like the very short-lived fight between Morpheus and Smith, like in that bathroom thing, and just like the way he's jumping up and avoiding, and then like the just fast-paced punches and blocks, and like it was really cool. The choreography.
Well, I liked how they the choreography, but when they showed how fast the agents were, that they made a couple, like the one that always comes to mind for me was with Neo, when you were like, oh shit, he's gonna get worked when he's getting punched in the subway, and they show the actual speed of how these agents are hitting, because sometimes you're like, wait, are they really like they're just fighting? It's the same thing. Are they really better? And then you're like, oh, they're way faster, and then you kind of understand that. And they do a really good job of putting that fear in you. So they just Just such a cool premise. I could keep going on and on and on. Alex probably like, I'm good, but
I love listening to the two of you talk about this movie. It's great.
Yeah, because Alex, like, I don't feel the same way, but it's fun. Well, I think too, like one of the things that gets me with this movie now that since it was mentioned a little bit too, was like it doesn't end like it ends the way you think it's going to end, but it takes as fast as the ending is. It takes a while to get there because you're like he turns around in the subway and you're like, oh yeah, he's going to beat the shit out of Smith. No, he gets his fucking ass kicked. And the only reason he gets out of it is because Smith's a cocky prick and wants to kill him using a train. It's the only reason he gets out of it. And yes, he fights him and he's good and but you can tell at the end when Smith grabs him, throws him against the wall, and then does like the super fast punches, he was fucking with him the whole time. Like he could have defeated him anytime he wanted to, but he was like, I'm gonna beat the shit out, take this time because he's a sinister prick. I'm gonna beat the shit out of him. Then I'm gonna kill him in the most obscure fucking way by holding him in a train because it doesn't matter to me, but it'll kill him. And I'm like, oh, that's funny. And it wasn't until the very, very end that Neo figures out to actually, he has to die to do it in order to, the whole resurrection, reborn, however you want to go down that savior pathway. But like, that's what triggers it. And so I love that.
She whispered in my ear, JJ, and then I could do all things.
Yeah. I think if I wasn't so forgiving, that movie would knock that part of like her telling him what the Oracle says is like, she did that man, and the man that I love would be the one. And I'm like, oh fuck. That whole sequence was pretty rough when I think about it objectively. But subjectively, I don't give a fuck. All right, should we rate it?
Let's do it. You're up, Jay.
I'm up. I get to go first. It doesn't happen very often these days.
Two big booty cheeks movies, but
yeah, pick better movies.
Fuck you. I pick great movies, you fuckers. Charles just likes to pick your guys' obscure shitty shit. One that was picked to torture our asses this fucking month by Mattson.
And that it did.
Everybody, but only you. Anyway, I'm going to give it a 5. I think it is one of those movies that when you look back on the history of Hollywood, like it was a game changer. It shifted the dynamic of Hollywood and movie making because of what it did, the simplicity and yet complexity at the same time of the story. And like, it takes a lot to get your shit in a pile and ducks in a row to tell a story that is going to have that much world building and, questions of like machines taking over the world and using us as batteries. And like, it's wild to build that kind of thing. And yet to tell it in a simplistic form where, much to my chagrin, there's a lot of exposition, but they do it in a way that is fun to watch, where they're walking down a busy city street looking like New York. Morpheus is navigating it perfectly and Neo's getting his ass beat by people bumping into him and shit. Like, it's just the subtleties and the little ways that they tell a story in this, and such a simple with underlying complexity is just genius to me. And the acting is great. The story's fun. It's interesting. It's relatable. Characters are great. I'm giving it a 5. I will watch this movie anytime, anywhere. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, not because it's one of the best ever, but because of what it was and the fact that it was very different. And it's a very cool story still to this day. Nobody's done it quite as well. And there was a lot of movies at the time that tried to do something. There's one called Existence with like Jude Law, and it's awful. And so that at this time frame, there was some movies coming out trying to tell this, like, are we in a simulation or type deal? But this one did it and did it well. So love it. 5. Great movie. All right, Alec.
I'm going to give it 4.5. I think you have some pretty big storytelling holes in the movie. Or I don't know if it's storytelling holes, plot holes, something. There's big gaps in there, but they do a very good job of covering them up so you do not care.
Yeah,
like that's brilliance at its finest, because they wrote the story. You have those gaps, and then they just almost feel like they wrote another plot point in the story that you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. 100% get it. We're good now. Yeah. And that kind of brilliance is very few and far in between. So I'm gonna give it 4.5.
Nice. It's a good point. All right,
Look, I've jizzed all over this movie. We already know it's a 5. I mean, Jay just kind of said it all. But the last thing I wanted to say, and we talked about it a little bit with the pills, is the subculture that this movie opened up as well about, are we all living in a simulation? Like, that's something that gets talked about even more now than it did then. Just another thing that this movie brought to light. So I think that's what impresses me the most. The further away we get from 99 when this movie came out, the more relevant this movie feels to an extent, because now we're talking about AI and how it's going to continue to run our lives even more, and the rise of humanoid machines. And I mean, Matrix is getting more relevant than less relevant to an extent, which I think is super cool, and just the foresight that this movie had. And then, like I said, to me, this movie, it just has the it appeal. It's sexy, it's an interesting concept, and the action's cool. It's just an awesome, awesome movie. This movie's so good, I could go downstairs right now and start watching it, and I would be very happy.
I'm
I
considering
cannot.
it.
I am also considering. I can tell you, for me to say that, as you guys know, there are a short list of movies on one, if not maybe a second hand, that I could go do that right now and do it. And I'm not like JJ or Alec, who's watching tons of stuff. I don't do that. Like, it's just not my thing. Gladly do it with this movie. Absolutely, very happy to do it. Incredible movie. Happy we reviewed. I can't believe it's taken us so long to review this movie.
Well, we did the 4th one. Were you on that one, Alec, or was that before you joined us?
I think I was on that one
with the newest one. With yeah, that one was
to an extent. Jay just
different.
pointed, like, if this movie had just ended when it did, would we be happy? I could say yes, but man, the fighting is so good in some of the others that
Well, I was just sitting here thinking about that actually, and I was like, I stand by that. Like, I'm fine. I would have been fine if we never got any other Matrix movies. However, how good one of the for me, the final saying of how good this movie is to me is it makes me want to watch the inferior sequels.
Yeah, it does too.
Just to continue living in that world and, you know,
observing. Well, it's a funny thing. Right? You're on it's like a waterfall. You're like that.
Yeah.
1, 2, like, and I know they become more of a progressive train wreck, but I'm still so invested that I mean, even the others that we reviewed them, they're not as great or even close, but I'll still watch them.
Yeah. And there's still some amazing parts to them. Like, I enjoy them. There's just parts where I'm like, you didn't think that through. So it was like, but I love some of the complexity. Like, one of my, just not to jump out of this movie, but one of my favorite parts in the second movie is when he meets with the architect, and like the fact that I had to watch the architect scene. I went back to the theater and watched that the second one at least 2 or 3 times just to see that, because at the time I couldn't just fucking stream it a month later. I knew I was gonna have to wait a year or 2 before I could rent it or buy it. I wanted to watch that scene because I knew there was some serious exposition in there that I needed to understand the world. And then when I finally got it, I'm like, that's genius shit. We're talking about these machines are so smart. They built in a fucking formula that was incomplete. And so there's like integers left. And so that's what he is like this conflagration of like not imperfect calculations. And so it's like, holy shit. So there's parts of these movies that, even though there's parts that are terrible, there's genius in there.
Yeah, they just lost a little bit of the way to help that translate to a more basic audience.
Yeah. And I think they got in their own way because they got so much money they could introduce new technology that just didn't help the visuals at all. But I don't know how you do it without.
Alec, have you seen the others?
Only a couple times, like maybe twice.
But you've seen them though. All right.
Yeah. Anyway, there it is.
Yeah, this movie.
Very high scores. Great movie.
Of all the movies we've reviewed, because we've done like The Patriot and The Dark, like this is on my short list. This might make my if I had to rethink my top 3, like I think it might be in it.
Yeah, it's top 5. Top 5.
Easy top 5.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a great movie.
Top 100.
I was gonna say, I love watching Alec's face. He's like, you fuckers are crazy. Top 5 shit. Hey man, nostalgia's a thing, boy. I'll tell you what.
It is.
having my mind blown at 18, fucking stuck around for a lot of years now.
Whatever.
Almost 30.
Have we decided what we're doing next month for our listeners?
We're doing the arbitration month.
Are we bringing it? Oh, I've been requesting this for many a month. We're going OG status.
Bringing
Jay,
back some arbitrations.
tell our listeners what that is, because many of them probably don't even know.
Yeah, if you haven't listened to us before, you can go back and listen. We used to do arbitration episodes where we do twin movies or similar movies. It wasn't always twin movies because there's some pretty strict guidelines for them to be called twin movies, but similar movies of a vein, like we've done 007 and Mission Impossible together. Those kind of movies.
This absolutely predated Alec, right?
Oh yeah,
easily.
Alec, I don't think he's ever done an arbitration.
I haven't.
Yeah,
I think my arbitration cherry.
In fact, the first arbitration we ever did, Mattson and I were by ourselves.
We were.
Yeah, we did
Knives Out and the Murder on the Orient Express. Right?
Yeah. That was the first 5 that was ever given too. I gave a 5 to Knives Out.
Those were good movies.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're gonna do that. I got to get those posted today.
I'm very excited for all of our listeners. It's a little bit more work for us, but I also think it's fun if we can get that back in rotation, because this group is nothing but opinionated. Should be a good time.
What?
Looking forward to it. Yeah, it should be fun, and I'll have those posted. So, in going along with what Alec's about to tell you about here in a second, go check us out on Patreon, and you can vote on those arbitrations.
Yes, you can.
So yeah, go check it out.
We give our people, should I say my people?
That's right. And then they give back to us, like in the form of Charles sending me a leg lamp. So we appreciate our patrons around this joint. We do some shitty movies for them, and they get to vote. So come join us.
Sure.
And Alec, now that I've stolen at least a quarter of your thunder, tell everybody where they can find us.
This is great. I'm just deleting everything that I spent 30 seconds writing. I'm never gonna get that 30 seconds back.
That's right.
Anyways, yeah. So thank you for tuning into The Matrix. This wraps up our month of original screenplays. So appreciate you guys tuning in and watching through that. Question for the comments is, I want to know, red pill or blue pill? I think most of us, circumstances notwithstanding, probably pick blue pill and go right back into the Matrix, but want to see if there's any red pill folks out there. And then also let us know what you thought of the Matrix. Are you a big fiver like Mattson and JJ, or could you do a little bit less? We'll see. A shout out to our patrons, Richard and CB, for picking this movie, putting it on the list, and for helping us select topics like JJ was talking about. That's the place to go, guys. Get involved. Also see all the behind the scenes content and extra episodes. So if you're finding a little lackluster What's Our Verdict in your life, go ahead and tune in there. You can get hours upon hours of content.
Yeah,
right there on the Patreon at What's Our Verdict. So with that, I will kick it back to our fearless leader, the King of Crash, the Titan of Terror, a JJ.
I don't know about fearless. If you guys follow me, that's your own problem. But with all that, we appreciate you tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Cinemagic out.
Whoa!